Okay, hello everyone everywhere. My name is Al Horner and this is Script Apart, a podcast about the first draft secrets of great movies. Each episode, a brilliant screenwriter revisits their first draft of what became a beloved movie. At least that's how we do things in this corner of the multiverse. Maybe in another, we're a gardening show or something. Who knows? Anyways, I can't tell you how excited I am for today's episode. It's really not often that you encounter a movie as staggeringly original as the one we're talking about today. Everything Everywhere All at Once is the latest release from writer-director duo The Daniels. This movie is surreal, it's hilarious, it's heartbreaking, it's aesthetically jaw-dropping, and it's full of the most mind-blowing action, occasionally involving characters with hot dogs for fingers. I did tell you it's original. The film follows Chinese-American laundromat owner Evelyn, played by Michelle Yeoh, whose business, marriage, and relationship with her daughter are all simultaneously crumbling. As if that wasn't enough chaos for her, one day she's thrown by the revelation that she's not the only Evelyn that exists. As it turns out there is an infinite array of other Evelyns occupying parallel universes. One's a movie star, another's a kung fu master, so on and so forth. What happens from that moment on is kind of too manic and complex to describe here. Just trust me when I say it is one of 2022's best movies by some distance. And honestly, one of the most joyously inventive sci-fis perhaps of all time. I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but go see this film and tell me I'm wrong, I dare you. The Daniels and I met up in person for this very special spoiler conversation. That's right, the first ever IRL Script Apart recording. We talked about the wildly different original opening that they had for the movie in their first script, and their plans for a narrator, quite possibly to be voiced by Susan Sarandon. We go pretty deep into the meaning of the everything bagel at the heart of this movie, we talk about the science that fed into the plot, and we also discuss how I ended up being moved to tears by a scene involving two rocks in the desert wearing stick-on googly eyes. I'll say it again in case you missed it, this is a spoiler conversation, we're going to talk about every single plot point, so if you're yet to see Everything Everywhere All at Once, please hit pause now. Get yourself to a cinema, it came out in the UK today, then come back as we delve into every detail of this incredible movie. A quick reminder before we dive in that if you like what we do and want to help us continue to grow, Script Apart is now on Patreon. Yes, for the price of a single monthly cup of coffee, you can get ad-free episodes, upcoming exclusive bonus content, and the chance to submit your questions for future guests. A huge thank you to those already supporting, a list that includes Rob Hollenby and Lewis Adamu. If you'd like to get involved, simply head to patreon.com/scriptapart. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into it, shall we? This is the Daniels, aka Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, discussing the first draft secrets of Everything Everywhere All at Once. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're listening to Script Apart, hosted by me, Al Horner, produced by Camille Demek. The Daniels, welcome to Script Apart. This is actually the first ever in-person recording of a Script Apart episode. So,
really?
Yeah,
wow.
Whatever strand of the multiverse we're in right now that's afforded this, I'm glad to be in it with you guys.
Wow,
cool.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, I don't know if I totally have the words quite yet for how much I loved this film. Huge congratulations on it, guys.
Thank you.
There are certain movies that immediately after seeing for the first time, I'm really excited to see with a massive audience. Like, I need to witness my friend's reaction to a variety of scenes, in particular, the hot dog hand sequence.
Yeah.
Are there particular scenes from the movie since it's been coming out that when you've been ducking your head into screenings, you've kind of relished, and that's not a hot dog pun, you've relished seeing people respond to?
Did you say hot dog bun?
Hot dog pun.
I'm just kidding.
Obviously, all the fight scenes are so much fun with an audience, especially because we wanted to combine humor and action and make both of them shine at the same time. And so that has been really rewarding when you just see an audience spontaneously applaud after a fight sequence. It's like the most satisfying feeling. But
Or when you hear them scream, "Oh no, please, no, no, no."
Please don't do that.
When there's trophies involved in that fight scene.
Trophies or paper cuts. The whole experience is really satisfying as a director. But then the one that surprised us the most was probably the rock sequence. because that was one of the weird experiments that we selfishly wanted to make, but we didn't know if the audiences would be quite as excited about it at this indulgent, weird sequence.
We were like, oh, this might be a scene they laugh about later.
Yeah.
You know, like after it's over when they're like, man, there was that quiet scene with rocks. But no, it's so fun with an audience because it's quiet. It's just, you know, kind of like a PowerPoint presentation that the audience reads together. And and
everyone's laughing at different times
and laughing at each other, and some people get very emotional in that scene, and so it's like such a fun kind of piece of performance art, you know, just being like, how's everybody reacting in the room to this subtitled thing, you know?
Right. But it's also, I think a lot of people have been craving that silence and craving that like moment of reprieve from the chaos of just regular life, and
especially after the first hour and a half of our movie.
Our movie's trying to recreate that so that we can kind of carve out the space, and so you can feel the room just kind of connecting in a really weird, like, I don't want to get too woo-woo about it, but there's that energy that just feels very strange during that rock scene when you watch it with the right audience. Obviously, some audiences will be like, "What is this bullshit? This is so stupid." Mm-hmm. But with the right audience, it is it's fantastic.
Yeah, because I mean, like the pacing of the movie, it's such an assault on the senses. It's so bombastic, and then that moment comes, and it's just this little island of stillness.
Yeah,
it's the craziness. But we'll talk about that moment in more detail. But first, I wanted to ask guys, like, we're in a bit of a moment of like, multiverse stories at the minute, and I'm seeing a certain new Marvel movie tonight after this. The term itself feels new, but we've been fascinated by the butterfly effect kind of lives that we could have led for decades as storytellers, right? Like, It's a Wonderful Life is, in a way, kind of a multiverse movie.
Totally. Yeah, one of the first, maybe. Yeah.
What do you think it is that's so intrinsically human about, like, these types of stories that we keep coming back to? Like, why do we love to sort of contemplate the ways that things could have panned out, but for the flap of a butterfly wing?
The first thing that comes to mind is the disconnect between the fact that we have these infinite imaginations as humans. Our brains are just built to constantly be calculating and processing different narratives in our heads. And yet we are trapped in these very limited bodies, and how frustrating that is as a living person who has to move around in one physical space, knowing that this is all we get. How scary it is to be trapped in this one moment, in this one existence, knowing that your imagination and your brain wants to be going in every other direction. And I think that tension is probably something that has frustrated us, ever since we, first.
Since our brains, became the way they are.
Exactly. And so, like, capable
of believing in made up stuff.
Yeah. And I think the problem now is that tension has only accelerated because of the internet, because now not only do we have our own imaginations to contend with, we have the imaginations of everyone else on the internet, and so we are seeing infinite stories happening all the time, and you cannot help but just imagine, oh, what if I went that direction? Oh, what if, because you look up your friends on Facebook or Twitter from high school, and you're like, oh, we all came from the same exact town, and yet look at where we all ended up. Especially, it's not lost on us that we are two filmmakers who, we came from middle-class families. We never thought we would ever be able to actually succeed in the film industry. And yet here we are in London doing this conversation with you about our movie that somehow has, become fairly successful. And how bizarre that is, knowing that when I was in high school, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I felt really lost and actually didn't think I was ever going to amount to anything. And so it's just the way our brains work, and the internet has made it so much more palpable, like all the different lives we could have lived. And so I think people are really relating with.
And if you make a bunch of different usernames, you yourself can live a bunch of lives.
That is also true. Yeah.
No one's found my secret Reddit, right, where I'm an awful person. But
it's actually really interesting you mentioned that. Like, the film does actually feel like what it feels like to be online in 2022, like the juxtaposition of it all, like the way you have all these colliding tones, narratives, and aesthetics kind of spilling on top of each other. It does have the sort of frenetic feel of sort of whizzing through a timeline and seeing the incongruity, I suppose, of a meme of a dog wearing dentures next to something completely heartbreaking and sort of harrowing. Was that something then you tried to kind of instill into the movie, or how much was the internet kind of playing on your minds as you worked on this?
I mean, 100%. I think the way you put it is like perfect. Yeah, incongruity. Like that's what it felt like to be alive when we started writing this movie, and we're like, can we use cinematic language? Can we use the tools of genre to create that emotional tonal whiplash in a film? And can we actually make it, rather than just making it unpleasant, can we actually make something meaningful out of that? It's...
And I think as we wrote it, we had this idea of a villain, Jobu Tupaki, and we were trying to kind of crack what's her problem and what's her voice, and started to kind of reflect on millennials and Gen Z kids and what it's been like to grow up on the internet when your parents didn't, and how that generation gap is very specific. Like, it's so weird to like stumble across the stuff we stumbled across when we were kids, and we didn't talk to our parents about it, and now we're adults and we have to be like, guess what, Mom? I went into the wrong chat rooms. You know,
I saw
everything.
Yeah.
And so that the internet informed so much of kind of her character, that sense of humor, and kind of those themes, and we didn't have to point the camera at a phone, which was nice, you know, because we didn't want to. Right. But we still got to kind of like explore how we're feeling.
The idea of like a multiverse story or writing a meaningful multiverse narrative, I've heard you describe the idea of the multiverse as inherently anti-story. Mm-hmm. I was wondering if you could like unpack that term for me, and like some of the obstacles in writing a narrative that feels meaningful within a framework of this thing, the multiverse, that kind of proposes that we're all random iterations of infinite other versions of ourselves. It seems like that's a tricky thing to kind of crack and make meaningful.
Totally.
It is one of the things that makes the multiverse such a silly thing for all of us to be trying to work in as storytellers. It's the opportunity is great because there's just so many things you can do with it, but then the pitfalls are also really they're the kinds of things that, like as we said, can destroy the narrative, because your audience probably already knows this, but like every screenplay is all about the decisions the characters make and what those decisions tell you about the character. And over the course of a film, that's how you get to be inside of the character's head, is through the decisions. And in the multiverse, one of the weird things that happens is you introduce this idea that every decision has a universe in which they go this way, and then at the same time there's a universe in which they do the exact opposite thing. And so suddenly all decisions break down, which means narrative starts to break down. Which means the movie is
just a collection of random decisions in a sea of universes where all the other decisions also happened, and there's not a right or wrong universe in any way you're supposed to care about that character. Which, I mean, it makes sense why people mostly use the multiverse to explore an alternate dimension, one possible, whatever. But then like the actual philosophy and physics and science, is exploring the idea generally of an infinite number of them. And filmmakers are understandably scared to open up that much, open the box all the way. And very early on, we were like, but that's what interests me. Like that, I would when I read about the physics, it like fascinates me how scary that is, and how hard to reconcile infinity.
There's this sci-fi writer who mostly only works in short fiction, but Ted Chiang. I don't know if his work is fascinating because he understands the science, he respects the science, and then he takes the simplest ideas and pushes it to its logical conclusion, which is often like really terrifying and overwhelming. And when you read something like that, you can't help but then look at all other sci-fi and be like, this is for babies. It's like right. you held back. And so after reading Ted Chiang's...
Even Arrival, which is based on one of his short stories, they had to really tone down parts of it in order to make it cinematic. Right. And you read the short story, and the short story is about like unchangeable time, and about like if you were a fourth dimensional being, like everything would be fated, nothing is changeable, you can't change anything, everything happens, you know. And then you watch the movie and they're like, we're gonna make time a little changeable because otherwise, like,
our characters are just
our
puppets
characters learn nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't change anything.
Right. It's not good. Again,
It's
not
not
good
a crowd
narrative.
pleaser if she can't talk to the general of China and stop the bombs.
But I do think that, like, to us, that was what got us excited about making this movie, was that impossible challenge of like pointing the camera at infinity and still creating meaning in the middle of all of that. And you know, the screenplay took us many years to write because we just had to keep trying. We had to basically mix some chemicals together, see what the chemical reaction was, and realize, oh, that wasn't right. Throw that in the trash. Let's try again with another set of chemicals. And we just kept doing that over and over again. There were a lot of page one rewrites because we really wanted to see the limits of a screenplay in some ways. We just wanted to break every rule in a way to see what rules we needed to hold on to maintain, you know, a good, enjoyable film. And then also discovered the rules and the scaffolding that are often associated with a good screenplay that we didn't need for this film. Because we were like, oh, you know what? What if we just destroyed the 3-act structure and found a new way to look at this film in a fun, exciting way. But there's a lot of discovery because the challenge of filming infinity was just something that we were not
film, like pointing at infinity, getting to that existential place and pulling the audience back. And like some drafts it'd be like, oh, we didn't get as low as we want to get, or we didn't get back successfully, and kind of constantly trying to make that low point and that high point,
right,
earn them somehow.
But yeah, to finish my sentence, we were not good enough writers for that task, for that challenge. We were not up for the challenge of doing that, and so we had to keep, basically through the process of repetition, become the filmmakers that could make that happen. You know,
right? Yeah. Yeah, because it feels like, you know, there is, correct me if I'm wrong, but my interpretation was that there is a 3-act structure, and that, you know, for all the sort of experimentation elsewhere in the film, ultimately there's something quite linear about, like, it's a character, Evelyn, who starts the film one way and goes through this journey that transforms her and makes her a more accepting person, that kind of fixes her relationship with her daughter at the end. And
for sure,
there was a sort of, there was something traditional, a traditional backbone that you fell back on. Is that fair to say?
Totally.
No,
how dare you?
No, we did something brand new. We didn't read a single Robert McKee book.
Yeah, but no, you're completely right in that the illusion was that there was no structure. But in fact, it was because there were so many different narratives that were kind of intersecting in a strange way, where we would have the family drama had a more traditional 3-act structure, but then that was constantly being interrupted by an action film that only had 2 acts, and then had to take a break, and then it came back at the end. Yeah. And then, you know, of course, some things had almost like a 5-act structure. Some things only came in, some narratives came in for one moment, for one scene, and, you know, that was all
music video structure.
Exactly. And I like to think of it as like a turducken. I don't know if you guys have those here.
Don't think so.
You guys don't?
Okay. It's a turducken.
Who does have turduckens? I think it's just like an internet thing.
No, it's American because of Thanksgiving. So we have Thanksgiving.
It's like a duck inside a turkey with...
No, there's a chicken. And you stuff a chicken into a duck, and then you put the duck into a turkey, and then you roast the whole thing. It's called turducken. And this film was that, where we took a family drama and then had it sidetracked by a sci-fi, and both of those things got stuffed into a romance that then got blended up into an internet YouTube rabbit hole, and then by the end somehow came back together into the family drama once more.
And there's probably some little bits inside the chicken. I don't know what kind of meat would be the fourth thing, you know, like
bacon bits, right?
Bacon bits inside.
Yeah. This metaphor is really working.
Yeah.
I'm just hung up on how Turducken sounds like a band I would have seen open up at the Old Blue Last.
Oh, yeah.
You know, maybe you guys could have done a music video. So your first draft, originally the movie had a narrator, right? And you envisioned this person maybe being perhaps Susan Sarandon or someone Susan Sarandon-like.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, you did your research. The way that we like to put it is like there's a narrator at the beginning of the film that it almost feels like the opening of Magnolia, just trying to thematically and tonally prepare you for the exploration of infinity. That was like the goal. Because
Fade in, interior, apartment, dining room. I found the script earlier.
yeah.
Here we are in this moment at the beginning. And because most beginnings are also often endings, it would be wrong for me to not point out that we are also here at the ending. And then it goes on. It's very pretentious.
Yeah, it's very pretentious. And part of that was because at the time we were writing this script, there were no other multiverse films. This was before Spider-Verse. This was before, before any Marvel introduction to the multiverse. And so we felt like this would be a really fun way to bring people in. And then the twist would be halfway through the movie, you'd realize that this was actually Michelle Yeoh's character from another universe in which she was adopted by Americans, brought over to the US and grew up with perfect English, sounds exactly like Susan Sarandon, and has become a successful writer who is writing the novel that you are watching the movie adaptation of. Very complicated, a little too Charlie Kaufman. We ended up just lifting that whole through line because I think that was a big reason why it was 240 pages. It's just there's way too much narration. It was way too much fun to write in that voice. And I had prior to writing that stuff, I had just revisited Douglas Adams and just his narration is so playful and so smart and dumb at the same time. And so, yeah, that was one of our first attempts was trying to weave that in to see if we could use a narrator to help contain infinity. And it ended up not being that useful. So, yeah.
Yeah, because the narrator introduces W.T. Warren, a 20-something football helmet tester in 1912 Pennsylvania. And his job involves putting on the helmets and running headfirst into a farmhouse wall. There's a quantum accident that causes him to pass completely through the wall during one test. He gets incredibly drunk, decides that God wants him to inspire people with miracles, and then is fatally stabbed while trying to impress a girl, being a vigilante.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can see why, my presumption when I was reading that was you guys must have thought we need to get to the Wang family quicker. Is that the case, or?
I mean, yes. It was because now when you watch the film, the opening shot is just a family portrait of them inside of a mirror. And we realized, this film, after a couple drafts, we realized this film only survives the chaos if the family is always there, very present. The family narrative is always present. And I think that was something that is obvious, from a screenwriting perspective, you gotta focus on the characters. But again, early on, we were just trying to push and pull and stretch what the screenplay was just to see what we could sustain, what kind of experiments we could actually follow through on. That was one of the ones where we failed, and we're like, you know what? We just got to go back to the basics with making sure that you always know emotionally where our characters are.
A lot of times we'll unapologetically label scenes as according to what movie we're ripping off, and so we were like, oh yeah, that's the Magnolia intro. W.T. Warren is the same as the guy who gets beat up by the three guys who had the same name as him on the street that has his name in Magnolia. And then we also wrote a bunch of intros that were more like Matrix intros that were just fun science fiction. You're thrown into it. What on earth is happening? Scenes. And we have the same problem Dan's talking about of just then when you come back to the Wong family, you're kind of just waiting for the sci-fi to come back. And it's harder to invest in the intricacies of the family dynamic, which ultimately we realize, no, that's the point. The whole movie's about their family. We need it.
Right.
I want the audience to care about them.
Yeah, the original version of that sci-fi opening, Michelle's character, Evelyn, is a professor at a college teaching quantum physics. And again, this was because this was before a lot of multiverse stuff was happening.
We were explaining the multiverse to a room full of students, and she's drawing dots on the wall to demonstrate
the double slit experiment.
This experiment, and then the kids start laughing, and she looks, and the dots have drawn a penis. Statistically.
Are you familiar with the double slit experiment? Is that something that you think your audience will recognize?
I'm personally not, but maybe our listeners are way smarter than me.
Yeah, just a side note, and you guys can edit this out if it's whatever, but basically there's two
It's real science.
two slits in a material that they basically shoot photons through, light through, and then there is a photosensitive material on the other end that will receive the photons, and based on how the photons go through the two slits, you'll see different patterns. And they found that when you just shoot photons through the two slits, it actually acts like a wave instead of a particle. The photons actually go through both of the slits at the same time, and there's a weird interference pattern where it's like a wavy thing that doesn't make any sense that kind of hits the photosensitive material. And what happens if you have a camera looking at it, like once you add an observer to that interaction, suddenly the interference pattern goes away and the photons decide to go through one or the other and not both at the same time. And so
it was like a conundrum in physics of just like, why on earth would observing this experiment change the experiment?
And also like the act of not observe, or the decision not to observe it, basically is implying that the photon is in two places at the same time. And so anyways, it's a really silly thing that like it's basically sparked all of quantum physics and all these ideas
and then
of
the theory became that like
yeah.
that it does exist in both places at the same time, and only by observing it do we suddenly choose one universe. But like we're actually like the photosensitive paper is recording like the undulating waves that are our universe, and it's only once a human observes it that like we're suddenly.
So anyways, long story short,
in one universe.
we turned it into a dick joke.
So it turned into a dick joke,
she draws dicks all over the.
And then she's like, "Oh no, she's here," and then she talks to like alpha people, and Jobu comes in.
She tells her class to leave, and
the class runs away, and then Jobu kills her and flies away on a pig.
But then the interesting,
just like the Matrix,
yeah. The thing I do like about it is after she kills the professor, you just watch Jobu roam the streets of many universes. So you're just watching her move from universe to universe, and she's looking for something. And they kind of tease you into this idea that like the movie eventually explores, which is the villain is just a daughter looking for her mother, looking for a version of her mother who understands her. I thought, I really loved that. I originally like kind of stealing from Paprika, that Satoshi Kon film, because the opening of that also has a woman who is just like moving between realities, and it's so intriguing, and you want to know who she is and how she can do this. Mm-hmm. But again, ultimately, it decentered the family, and that was we realized just a wrong decision. Yeah.
So instead, the opening scene, instead of having the dick joke sequence, instead you have this scene which really does like manage to establish so much and set up so much that's going to pay off later in the film. Like thematically and from a character standpoint, we have Evelyn and her husband, Waymond, preparing for an audit. We have the prospect of their imminent divorce. We have a birthday bash for Evelyn's father, who had previously disowned Evelyn for marrying Waymond and moving to the US. And then there's the introduction of Joy in this scene that kind of like simmers with Evelyn's hesitancy, I suppose, to sort of embrace her sexuality. And that erupts at the end with this kind of moment where she tells Joy to lose weight in the car park. Somewhere in the mix, we've also got a sprinkling of mystery. We've got the CCTV footage of Waymond doing parkour around the laundrette. How hard was it to kind of find an elegant way of barreling all that effectively into one scene?
It's still it's debatable whether or not we pulled it off.
We did. It's good.
It's a lot. Yeah.
But it was I remember, we were hitting our heads against the wall like W.T. Warren, and then Dan wrote a longer version of this whole intro, and something just felt really exciting and right about it. This like, let's make Evelyn's life overwhelming before there's any science fiction. So then the metaphor is just so clear, and also like now we just understand the dynamics, and we didn't do crazy drastic rewrites from that. It was just an editing process, and it was kind of like something just clicked there, but it wasn't like it was several drafts in.
Yeah.
So the characters were already pretty fully formed.
Yeah, I do think part of it was just making sure that the audience knows this woman in her normal everyday life. Again, this is classic screenwriting. You got to see them before the inciting accident or incident, so you know exactly.
Classic inciting accident.
Yeah, in our case, it's an accident. No, yeah, the inciting incident. But one of the interesting things was we wanted it to feel chaotic without any sci-fi, as you mentioned, but then also making sure that it felt like everyone was talking past each other, that everyone was already in a multiverse, everyone was already in different universes, everyone's in their own world. Even the for those of you who don't speak Chinese, even the grandfather Gong Gong, he speaks Cantonese, while Wayman speaks Mandarin, and then Joy the daughter can barely speak either, and so they're actually talking different languages, and so the whole thing just kind of felt like an opportunity for us to show the audience that we already exist in the multiverse before the multiverse even comes into play. And basically, it's setting up the problem for our character, which is this idea that in a chaotic world that is constantly pulling your attention towards all these other different things, it becomes impossible to just look at the people you love and to actually see eye to eye with them, and how that accidentally hurts people. And it's like we want to make sure that there was no moral judgments in this film. Like no one is necessarily evil. No one's doing anything wrong. It's just the fact that we exist in this chaos is enough to hurt each other. It's enough to cause any well-intentioned person to hurt each other. And so the opening is also just filled with these microaggressions. There's like tiny moments of careless racism, careless sexism, careless ageism. It's all in there, and it's not because any of these people are bad people. It's just because they don't have the time to fully look at each other and say, "You're a human being with who contains multitudes." Yeah. And so then once we set that up, the rest of the film is just kind of trying to dismantle that and be like, and basically try to show the audience and also our main character how important it is to just take a moment and look at someone and say, I can see you completely, I can connect with you completely, because maybe that's the only way we're going to survive the chaos, is if we just allow ourselves that time every now and then. So yeah, that intro, one of the references, I'd say there's two references for that intro. Punch Drunk Love. Yeah. Because first time I saw Punch Drunk Love, I like hated it because I was so stressed out the whole time. I was like, why am I so anxious? Why do I don't know what's going on? Is this bad screen rating? I can't tell.
I think you wrote it like to that score.
Oh,
and then the first cut was set to that score.
Yeah, I listened to a lot of Punch Drunk Love while writing it. So there was that energy. But then the other intro that I absolutely adore is the Home Alone movie. The Macaulay Culkin Home Alone movie.
Good intro.
It has this incredible intro. If you rewatch
it sets up everything.
Every joke, every trap that eventually Macaulay Culkin sets for the villains is set up. Every toy, it's all there. Every character. There's even this moment where you watch they spill some milk and soda onto the plane ticket that would have been Macaulay Culkin's plane ticket, and he throws it in the trash. It's like every little detail is set up in this whirlwind of an intro, and I was like, can we do this with our movie? I don't know. So yeah, it's really silly.
That's really interesting. And that observation that you said that's very much at the heart of the movie, is that something you had going in, or did you need to find that as you did you burrow into the script and sort of discover it and it unlocked the rest of it?
Mostly the second.
Yeah.
We usually approach a project with a question, not especially with this one, we had questions, not answers when we started, of just like, what do you do about the chaos and why, if nothing matters, what's the point? And just kind of like, let's try to answer that as we go. And also like, what do you do about the generational divide? We kind of figured out as we went, what we thought was a useful thing to say there. And what Dan said about like trying to not put morality in there was something we did a bad job of at first, and we kind of, I think, wrote early drafts that were kind of patronizing about Evelyn, where she was just homophobic. And then we were like, that's kind of uninteresting because I don't empathize with a homophobic woman, but as soon as we introduced a grandfather and a daughter and had her torn between two worlds, trying to please people and just unable to fully see and appreciate and acknowledge people, but not being willfully, decisively, mean to them, then we were like, oh, I empathize with this. This is tough, and that's very human. This is a better script, but we figured it out as we went. We weren't, Yeah.
Well, it sounds like there were so many iterations of the script that maybe it's almost easier for me to ask about the things that remained, the sort of like constant threads that were there from the beginning. So was was it always going to be Evelyn and Joy, their kind of mother-daughter relationship, their mother-daughter struggle played out in this sort of fantastical sci-fi way? Was that always going to be the crux of the movie?
No, that was it. It was definitely a later discovery. Actually, in fact, the first couple drafts was actually about a father and a daughter. Originally,
Really?
yeah. Originally, it was going to be Jackie
Wasn't
Chan
the
and
first
Michelle
draft
Yeoh.
Joy's not even the daughter?
Yeah. Jobu Tupaki wasn't even the daughter in
Yeah,
the
first draft it was
yeah.
a daughter
Interesting.
and like some evil girl.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so different.
So what was the light bulb moment that made you realize I can connect these?
Honestly, a lot of it comes down to just like the problem of ambition versus efficiency. It's always a problem with any storytelling, and we just realized there were too many characters, and we're like, this movie's already way too big. Oh wait, what if the daughter is the villain? And then that started opening up all these other. That's as a writer, that's what you're always looking for. You're always looking for decisions that suddenly just create a waterfall of other ideas, because whenever you have writer's block, that's usually an indication that one of your decisions is kind of just the wrong one. You've kind of hit a wall, and decisions like that just opened up the story again. We're like, oh, this is so much more exciting to create. Instead of doing a traditional good versus evil story, it's actually just a mother-daughter, parent-child relationship.
Like, yeah, I'm just thinking of other answers to the question you didn't ask. Just like, oh yeah, that was different too. Which I do think we aspire to get better at wasting less of our time and our producers' time. But it does make me think that like we really appreciate feedback, but a lot of times we're our own worst critic, and we'll get a note from someone, and instead of taking the note, we try to look behind the note, and a lot of times end up changing something else, not what they told us to, because we're like, oh, they think that doesn't work. That means all this isn't working. And so that happened a lot early on, where we'd get a well-meaning note that was small and then be like, no, let's just rejigger the whole family. Like I just remembered, we had a Morpheus kind of character that was separate from the husband and the wife, who came in and contacted her. And it was such an aha moment to be like, oh, it should just be Waymond and Alpha Waymond. And we should have the pushover become the boss. And that'll be such a fun dynamic to introduce into their marriage. But like early on, that was yet another character we were introducing and trying to juggle with everything that was just too much,
Yeah. So the distillation process was really, again, us constantly trying to throw everything at the wall and then realizing, oh, we have to keep funneling it back to the family, constantly funneling it back to these 3 or 4 characters. And I think that a lot of our rewrites were just refining that and bringing us closer to a version where that family was big enough and strong enough and resonant enough that it could it could survive the rest of the film, because I think early drafts really, the family were really washed out by the sci-fi, by the action, by the scale of it all, and until those two, the smallest thing and the biggest thing, could stand right next to each other, until that happened, we knew that the script wasn't working.
How did you decide on the different iterations of Evelyn? And were there other kind of multiverse things? We obviously in the finished film, we get the Hot Dog Hands version of Evelyn, we get the film star. Were there kind of other Evelyns that you almost had in the script?
Totally. And there were just slight variations of those universes.
Because usually it came from like a narrative moment or something. We're like, oh, in this moment, she needs to learn to fight because the sci-fi action movie demands of it. It demands that of us. But then in that moment, we would go like, okay, but this is an opportunity to reveal character as well. And so it was like a dumb aha moment to be like, oh, the moment that she learns how to fight is also the moment in which she decides to not go to America. What a drastic massive existential moment for our main character to have to experience both those things at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of stuff was really what we were chasing after. We were chasing after things that turn the sci-fi power of being able to connect to other universes into also an Achilles heel, where it's a double-edged sword, where the power comes with some sort of thorn as well. And that to us was like really playful. So a lot of the universes kind of came out of like plot necessities, and then we would find out what the underlying existential or intellectual, emotional experience our character would be going through because of that.
And we had a pretty big grab bag of just like genres we love and like kind of possible universes we could visit. And we knew we wanted the movie to have a spread of like very slightly different universes all the way to like what is our most absurd one, and we didn't want all unrelatable gibberish, but we also didn't want just like 6 universes where she's got slightly different careers, It's kind of like Groundhog's Day, you don't want to just watch him learn different skills for an hour. Like each one has to kind of like introduce a new existential life question and take things into a new kind of place. And so we kind of, it took a while, but it became this kind of escalation of just like, okay, these are our priority ones, and each one introduces something useful and new that takes Evelyn on her journey.
It's reminding me of, I love Groundhog Day. That's like one of my favorite movies ever. Probably seen that more times than any
I think it's
movie.
fine. So I'm the devil's advocate, I'll be like, okay, we can't just like rip it off. It's like,
no, I love that movie. And what's so brilliant about the film, I realized later, is the writer actually decided to model the stages of that film and the progression of Bill Murray's character after the steps of my brain is blanking. This will be a good time for us to edit it out.
It's like the stages of grief, like denial.
Yeah, stages of grief. That's what. So the great thing about that movie is the screenwriter modeled Bill Murray's progression after the stages of grief. There's the denial, there's the anger, there's the nihilism, just the moment of just giving up, and then finally acceptance. And so for this film, we kind of wanted to take this idea of the multiverse and slowly, over the course of the film, decenter our main character, pulling her away, like basically going from a hero's journey, like you're the hero, you're the best, come with us, you are going to be one to save the world. And despite the fact that that's what the sci-fi film is saying, the actual film is saying with every step, you are less important. You are nothing. You do not matter. Until finally at the end, like
you're the worst version of yourself.
There are universes in which life doesn't even exist. Like not only do you not matter, humanity doesn't matter, life doesn't matter, none of it matters. Like how can we pull you through all that? And then the last act of the film is us trying to convince ourselves as the writers, but also convince our character and the audience that maybe despite all that, there is still something worth living for, and there is still something that matters, and something there is a way to thrive in this life despite all that. And that was kind of our challenge to ourselves. And so there were a lot of universes. Sorry, your question about the universes that didn't make it in. A lot of it was just the selfish stuff that we thought were funny that we ended up realizing didn't fit that narrative need of our character. Like one of the ones I was just thinking about was there's a lot of like throwaway universes in our movie, and there's a sequence that I'm a little bummed we never got to put in there, but there was a sequence in which a villain throws a grenade at her. She jumps to a universe in which she's a dog, and she jumps up and catches it like it's a frisbee. And then mid-air, as she's falling, she jumps to a universe in which she's a gymnast, and then she does a split and catches herself just as she's about to
maybe go down an elevator shaft or out an open window or something.
Split and catch herself. But then in that moment, she dislocates her leg, and she goes,
screams in pain, but then
she jumps, and she's a chiropractor, and she pops her leg back in, and then she falls and is about to fall and hurt herself, and
the grenade's about to go off.
And the grenade's about, so she jumps and becomes a baseball pitcher, and she throws the grenade out of the way
really fast and
far.
Then
the last jump is she jumps to become a skateboarder. Skateboarders are really good at falling, and so she tumbles perfectly just as the explosion happens behind her, and it's like really badass. But this happens within 10 seconds. She jumps like 20 different places, or 10 different places in 10 seconds, and it becomes like this really like that would have been the moment where you realize, oh, she is fully the one or whatever. We ended up not using it, but it's okay.
You mentioned nihilism there. What did the everything bagel represent to you guys, and when did that enter the mix?
Nihilism, and just how those bagels scare me. Like the idea is everything on this, that's not good.
It was always there's this I came across this really interesting term. It's called a Schwarzschild radius. Are you familiar with this? It's the radius in which any given object's mass can be condensed to become a black hole. So everything has a Schwarzschild radius where like I could squeeze my phone, and basically the ratio between the volume and the mass, if I squeeze it down just enough, there's a ratio in which it will become a black hole. And so there was a moment where Jobu Tupaki would just love this, and she would just be constantly turning things into black holes. And it was like it's like her just screwing around. And one of the things was a everything bagel. And that was just kind of like a throwaway joke. It's like, oh yeah, that's my everything bagel. I put everything on it. Oops. And like, it was just
like she had followers who worshipped the everything bagel, and we just thought it was a funny religion, joke. And then meanwhile, we wrote all these drafts and knew that she was reckoning with these dark nihilistic thoughts, and we were struggling to write dialogue that we liked, about nihilism, because we didn't want to just have like her, we didn't want the audience to just roll their eyes and never feel it. And a lot of times what works on me, and so I put it in my movies, is like a joke. Like if it's packaged as a joke, then I can understand what you're saying without like rolling my eyes at your pretentiousness, like I can't quite invest in some screenplays that are just dead serious. And so then when we were wrestling with that, we salvaged the everything bagel, and we were like, oh, now we have a joke and we have an image that can just serve this kind of philosophical plot point, and we don't have to constantly say what Jobu means and what the bagel means. We can introduce it, say it once, and now we have a joke image, because also as screenwriters and filmmakers, like we're always trying to come up with ways that the story can visually be told, not just through, dialogue. And so I was like, oh, this is nice. And then once we were in the edit, we were like so sick of the everything bagel. It was so challenging, the most obnoxious visual effects challenge. And we were just like, oh, why did we do this? But it paid off. It was just hard.
And ultimately, Evelyn, she kind of concludes that the only way to overcome or find any kind of harmony, within the gravitational pull of the everything bagel is empathy. And there's first of all that incredible scene that we touched on at the beginning with the rocks, and then there's this astonishing fight scene in which she locates the pain beneath the anger of each of the antagonists coming towards her. And it's an incredible moment. And I was wondering how you kind of came to that idea, and how you found a way of knitting in Evelyn's evolving relationship with Waymond. Like, he feels like an important part of her learning that empathy is the way forward.
Yeah, I mean, he's the key, which is why we cast him, because that's his name.
His name is Key. Yeah, he is the key.
Key is the key.
Oh man, there's so many answers to this question, and I'm so sorry because we just love to talk, and there's two of us, so
so get ready. 30-minute answer. Here we come.
One of the things that happened early on, one of the conversations we had early on was the fact that we love action movies. We love The Matrix, we love Kill Bill, we love, all these films were really formative, but at the same time, the contradiction is underneath it all was that we don't really believe in violence, and we don't actually think we need more of that right now. There's nothing wrong with action movies. It's just I feel like we don't need to be adding
there might be.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think we need to be adding to that, because like that has a very strong there are a lot of marketing incentives as to why those are so prevalent everywhere. And so we were
always kind of struggling with that, which we've been struggling even before this movie. We've always been like, oh man, we love fight scenes, but also like don't really think violence is the answer. And so we were kind of always wondering how would we thread that needle? Like, this might be our one and only kung fu movie. Like what do we do? What kind of finale that's satisfying can you have if the answer isn't violence? And so it became like a really big aha moment when we kind of realized that you could use the multiverse to lose all faith, but also use the multiverse to do this impossible thing, which is like
to fully understand
to
someone.
find each person's pain. Like, oh, if I can tap into an infinite number of universes, I can figure out what will fix you. What an interesting power. And
it's like so stupid and like it's like bordering on cheesy, which is why it was so thrilling for us. It's like, can we pull this off? Can we make someone empathizing with the enemy just as satisfying as the bride stabbing someone with a katana? Can we make it just as fun using all the genre language and filmmaking techniques that can hit that dopamine hit, that usually you get when John Wick gets 5 headshots or whatever? Can we do that, but instead of destruction, it's about creation and connection? And now we're realizing, like, it was so fun, it was so satisfying for us to do that, and now
and really satisfying that it seems to work too.
But now we're wondering, is this a new genre? Should we be trying to push this out in the world? Should we be creating things that, because like now that I feel like we've perfected action movies, just as an industry. There's so many amazing action films. They're so satisfying to watch. They're so fun and creative. But now we need to be kind of moving the message in a different direction, just borrowing all the techniques that we've learned, all the like secrets that we have figured out, and try to find a different way to tell the same story in a more healing way.
So that's why we want to do a Mortal Kombat sequel.
Let's go
with friendships instead of fatalities, and so they're just becoming friends and stuff.
I know you're joking, man, but like it is kind of an interesting point, like what it means for you guys, given that like this is a film about intergenerational love. It's an action movie that sort of arrives at a conclusion of like empathy is a much bigger weapon, a much better tool in kind of overcoming the sort of problems in the world. With the success of a film like this, presumably like it opens doors for you. I've seen about 1,000 tweets all saying like, give the Daniels the keys to the MCU and this kind of thing. Like, how do you reconcile what you've just described and sort of like your hopes for moving action forward and moving filmmaking forward with a different message with, perhaps your interest in doing some franchise filmmaking? Your movies till now have kind of had a commitment to sort of telling original stories. Have you started to think about what like your next steps are and how you'll navigate all that sort of stuff?
We're always thinking about it.
We spent too much time on this question.
We finished this movie last July, and then we sat down with our manager and our producer, and we were like, we're going to talk about all our like half-baked movie ideas to try to pick one. And so we made an Excel document that just kept growing because we'd be like, oh, right, there was that one. And it's literally like 12 movies and 8 TV shows, and we can't decide which one we want to do or if we want to combine them all. And that doesn't even include this like insane opportunity that we now have to like to work on a big canvas and to speak to a huge audience that would come with like studio filmmaking and that has always kind of scared us because we're not sure if we'd be good at it. But also if we could say the sort of things we want to say, or we're constantly kind of like philosophically wondering like, what's the point of filmmaking? What is our point? What are we trying to do here?
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about memetics. Like that's the lens I look at the world and the way information moves around.
It's like the study of ideas and how they spread similarly to the way genes spread,
It's about the survival of the fittest and the way, in genes, you talk about genetic hitchhiking and like a lot of these terms that we use to describe the natural biological world, we could actually apply to ideas and culture. And so when we talk about franchises, it's not something we immediately want to do, but the mimetic power that comes with that is actually really interesting to us. And to imagine, okay, if one day we were to do a Marvel movie, what would we do with that opportunity? Marvel has the biggest built-in audience of human history. Like no one else has ever created what Marvel has created. And that is like really, it's applaud-worthy. Like it's very special that's having that platform. And to us, we're like, oh, if Kevin Feige asked us to do a Marvel movie tomorrow, we'd be like, yes, we'll do it. But I want to invite 10 of the smartest thinkers, philosophers, scientists, economists,
unapologetic politicians,
into the writers' room.
How do we fix the world?
What? And I want to ask each of them, what is the big idea that the world needs to know right now? Because we can feed it into a Marvel movie and make it as fun as possible.
We might piss off some fans, but they'll learn something.
They're going to learn something, and then we're going to be having the right conversations, even if we are fighting and having a lot of a really complicated dialogue. At least they'll be they'll be closer to the right kind of dialogue. And so that's how our brain works. We're very Machiavellian. We're like chess strategists. Like this movie.
So we think we're just going to make our movie the way we want to make it next.
Yeah. So we're probably not going to do a franchise thing.
That's just not how something that huge works.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Until one day, I don't know. I feel like one of the cool things about our career so far is we have been uncompromising for the most part. Obviously, we do some things here and there that we do commercials and stuff like that. But for the most part, uncompromising in our vision. And the world just keeps slowly bending to us, which is a very rare thing. And we don't take that lightly. And we just hope that as we continue our careers, we get bigger opportunities to create narratives that, normally don't get to be made. So yeah, that's our main rule to ourselves is if someone else can do this, then why are we doing it? We have to be making something that no one else can make, because I do think that's the kind of thing that will slowly shift the idea of what a movie can be.
Should I pitch the porn I want to make, or is that going to be under a pseudonym?
Yeah, we'll probably want to make porn.
Yeah.
There are scenes in this bordering on porn.
I feel like it's just this huge media that so many people watch, and it's not ethically made, and there's not much what if you made ethical stuff? It's all about consent, good communication, kink positivity.
But just as good as that, really raw stuff.
Same as empathy fighting. There's too many action movies when you make empathy fighting. It's educational porn.
There's too much problematic porn that just really hits
one idea of how to change the world.
It hits the animal
screenwriters
button.
out there. Yeah. Fix that industry. The screenwriting's not good.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that seems a good place to end this conversation.
You're welcome.
But seriously, guys, whatever you do next, whether it is, a Marvel thing, Spider-Man would look great with hot dog fingers. But
someone else can do that, And now that it's out there, I feel confident someone else can do that, and I'm very happy for them.
Happy to, alley-oop. Is that the word?
Alley-oop, yeah.
Will you pass it to the other guy?
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at sports.
Well, whatever it is, guys, I really look forward to it. Thank you so much for this great film and for this awesome conversation. It's been great doing this IRL as well. First time.
Yeah, our pleasure. Hopefully hearing all those bad ideas that didn't make the cut make it seem not so hard.
Right, exactly.
You two can make a movie.
As long as you have enough time. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Script Apart, hosted by me, Al Horner, produced by Camille Demek. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.